Hello, my friends out there in the universe of power. Welcome to Titan Talk. My name is Gabe Pena. I am the Texas Titan. Today, I am joined by the world's strongest man under 105 kilograms, Andrew Clayton. Brother, it is so good to see you. How are you doing, my friend?
Uh, Pretty good. Body feels pretty good after the contest. Just trying to hit some other goals outside of competing, and hope to start 2023 pretty strong. So,
Well, I would say as far as starting off strong with some momentum, you are hitting it off on the right foot. We're about 3 weeks after contest now, correct?
I think so. I think it's 3 weeks this weekend. I really have lost track. It's flown by. It seemed like last weekend we were down in Daytona with a hurricane, and then now, for us in the south or southern area, it doesn't get cold, right? So just like one time period all year long. So it feels the same.
I hear you on that struggle, brother, and especially with OSG coinciding, of course, with that hurricane, and then with Thanksgiving, and then going into the holiday season at the end of the year. It's a bit of a blur. But how has your body recouped following that epic trial of strength?
I think a lot of people caught like the flu, because we're around a bunch of people, and then all the shenanigans of being up late after the contest because like you don't want to go to bed, you just want to hang out with people. So that trashed me more than anything. I don't think anything from the contest made me like super sore. On some of the events, I just didn't feel like I had to go like 100%, like as far as like under load. But yeah, being sick and like the phlegm and all that kind of stuff after, that sucked. But I've kind of got a groove now. Like the first 1 or 2 weeks back lifting were kind of like, everything kind of hurt and I kind of was a baby and just did a lot of easy light stuff, high reps, I just got a pump. And then now I'm kind of like actually lifting again.
There's something
So
so therapeutic about getting that pump in those sessions where your body's kind of like re-priming the engines after that big dump in contest. But I hear you also on that bug going around. We're getting it here too. My daughter has it now. I had it last week. It's just it goes along with this time of year. But brother, it's so good to see you back in action. I feel like there was quite a hiatus in time where I did not see you in person from I believe it was around 2017 at nationals, maybe 2016, up
I,
until
at 2016 Nationals, I remember that was Iowa, right?
yep, that was
Yeah.
it.
I think that's the last time I saw you in person. Did we compete together? I was trying to remember. Did we compete in like 2013 or 2014? I can't, or maybe I'm wrong.
Possibly, we may have competed either in 20. It would have been around 2016, around that time.
Oh, okay. Then I might not have ever competed against you. Then I'm not sure.
I think right around the time that I started really making the push for my pro card was right around the time where you started dropping a bunch of weight.
Yeah, I think it was like 2014, 2015, because you were kind of one of the top people for what 15, 16. I mean, for a while, and you like people don't realize like the bottleneck effect of getting that pro card. It's gotten a little bit. It's opened up a little bit more now because they give more pro cards, but it used to just be one, right?
Yeah.
So it was like five people at the top were like all pro status, and it'd be like one weird event would throw it off. Oh, this weird Husafel or uh, frame or whatever, and people would just drop. Um, so yeah, so now it's a little bit different because there's more, and then now there's multiple federations to be pro, I guess. So it's kind of I don't want to say diluted it, but it's kind of changed like maybe the respect for it.
Well,
They used
you're on the right track there. I get this vibe when I talk to athletes from overseas too, because here in the States, the pro card means one thing. But when you go to the UK and you say I have a pro card, it's like, well, what do you mean? Like you don't do anything else other than strongman? Like you get paid nonstop to do strongman stuff like that? So the meaning of being a pro is a little bit kind of diluted here with that pro card. And even then, that pro card means only a lot to us as the individual going to it versus how much it means to someone else on the other side of the world. But yeah, it's been quite a journey for both of us. Talking back, recollecting all the way back to 2014 until now. Uh, for the listeners who aren't informed as to the world of Andrew Clayton, give us a brief background of you because you have gone through quite some impressive transformations and changes. You've competed across the spectrum of sports. Let's hear it.
Okay, I'll try to sum this up in like 1 minute or less.
Do yourself more justice than that, brother.
I started in 2009. I competed as a teenager. Um, got my butt kicked in the first show. A lot of it wasn't necessarily because I wasn't good at the events, but when you come in the strongman, you like have to know like the strategy. you got to hold the reps for the down calls, you know, all those types of things. So I was just like going mad, like throwing the weight everywhere, obviously not getting the down calls. So I got like 9th out of 10th place in open novice in my first show. And I remember getting in the car and being like, I gotta get better at this. So it was just an ongoing process to get better at strongman. So I won my next show, which was a team class. I actually competed against Wesley Claiborne in that contest. So I beat him there. So he probably hates me for that.
Hey, you gotta live those memories as often as you can, especially when he's around.
Because now he kicks my butt. But so 2010. So then 2011, I won team national. So that was kind of like my first, like, okay, I guess I'm kind of meant to do this sport. 2012, I went to my first men's nationals. 2013, I podium men's nationals. 2014, I got my pro card on the Arnold stage behind Mateusz Kiełkowski. I didn't really have a chance to beat him. He beat me too much in the Husfeld carry, and that kind of put a gap in everything else. But I was pretty much like behind him, or I beat him on circus dumbbell actually for reps and stone. And then I think I was like second or third to him on a couple events. I still talk to him on occasion. So that's 2014. 2015 was a weird year. One of the shows I wanted to do got canceled. And then I just did, the only show I did was ASM. So I did ASM in 14 and 15. And then I had already started like losing weight from probably like 320 pounds. So I was down to like 255. And I decided to get my middleweight pro card in 2016. So won that the first time. I don't like that they required that because I literally beat over half the field at ASM that year. And I actually beat the times of the middleweight with the heavier weights, weighing what the middleweights weighed. So don't like how
let the record show.
Yeah, well, it's not meant to go that way. Most people are going to grow into it. I kind of was already fat. So then when I got like, leaned out, I was, I only had the lean mass of a middleweight. So that was 2016. So 2017, 2016, I got second place at ASM in 105. That was kind of a heartbreaker. I really should have gotten first that year. So 2017, I did a bunch of shows. I did Lynn's first show he did. So that kind of was like a catalyst to get away from the endurance sports that I did in 2016.
2016, Lynn's first show at North Carolina Strongest?
No, it was not his first. It was first like official show. Oh, maybe it wasn't his first show. It was like the first like bigger show where 2017, the Europa, Mid-Atlantic Europa, whatever,
Gotcha.
where he combined weights and heavyweights. I consider that like his first big show because that's what got him, from what I hear, like official strongman doing the worlds that later that year in December was like how he ran that. I'm not sure if things were in the works before then, but so that was my first show with him, and I placed pretty well. And that kind of like told me to like go away from all the endurance stuff because during 2015 and 2016, I did half marathon, ultra marathon, or attempted an ultra marathon. I attempted a 100-mile ultra marathon. I got like 62 miles, and I got to the checkpoint. They'd already left, even though I was on time, and I was just kind of like out of it. I did triathlons. So yeah, so 2017 kind of said, you need to go back to strongman. That's like where you're probably the best at it. Kind of didn't perform well at the ASM, both for middleweight and for open. I believe I'm the last person to do both of those. So I thought that was a cool feat. They were like 5 weeks apart. And then that year I won worlds for 105, which at the time was like the biggest win ever. So then 2018, I broke a record for Axel as my last 105. I think so. It was January 2018. And then from then on, I basically was like, I got to get out of the 105 class for multitude of reasons. And then two, I really want, like, I'm always going to be a heavyweight or an open guy, even though I'm going to be identified on this podcast as 105. Because that's just my mindset is like, you're trying to get really, really strong. And having a body weight to limit you is not getting like to your peak strength. So I really wanted to like realize what that was. So I bulked up a little bit too quick, but I did Arnold Africa, Arnold Spain. I did USS Nationals. I won that to get to Arnold Spain. Then I won OSG. And then I attempted to break the American record axle at a very, very, very poorly run show. Don't do that, kids. If you're trying to break American or world record, like get paid for it, go to a good show. And then I went into Giants Live and very confident I would have broken it there. And that's where I got hurt. So that kind of is like the first part of the saga. And then there was like the gap period. I don't know how much you want me to, continue on. I don't
Well,
want to
we'll
rant
get
about.
into that gap period, and of course the injury. But what I want to pick your brain on is how have the various athletic endeavors that you've competed and contested your performance and ability and led to the growth of both you as a person and you as a person up here. You talk about, of course, transitioning from heavyweight to middleweight with the eyes back on heavyweight in the future, knowing that that's where you are, and then also doing things like triathlons, competing at a lighter weight and going to endurance sports also. How has all that shaped the person that you are today?
So I think in general, when I think of like either an athlete, a coach, or someone that works with athletes in any capacity, they need to have a lot of like abilities or tools in their toolbox. So I think when you only know, squat, bench, dead, those are the only tools you can pull out to gain strength or athleticism, whatever you're trying to focus on. So I think doing these different, whether you call them feats or attempting these different sports, just gave me more tools to work with, more understanding of different ways to train. There was a period in 2000, I guess 15, 16, like hybrid was really popular. It still is now. I just don't see it as much. The interference effect isn't that big of a deal. So I definitely learned like how much I could push my body towards the endurance realm without affecting strength. So that gained me confidence to know like, it's okay to do sets of whatever. It's okay to do a little running here or there. And from like another perspective, it built a good base. I had always been an athlete growing up as a kid, but I never really got into endurance sports. So once you build a base, like it takes a long time for that base to go away. So in some ways, that base probably went away by like 2018. But I think having that endurance base from 2016 allowed me to be in better shape for 2017, even though I didn't do much endurance stuff. And I think that's forgotten, especially like as the heavyweights, right? Because as you get stronger, you can't handle as much volume. You're so high intensity, the base starts to kind of whittle away. So it taught me that. And then from like a mindset perspective, like once you attempt a bunch of different feats, you gain respect for every sport. So I can't really think of a sport I'm like, oh yeah, that was really easy, because they're all really hard. I mean, I saw a guy run a 100-mile ultra marathon in like just over 12 hours. Insane.
It's nuts.
So yeah, I mean, and he actually lives where I live in Jacksonville, so I've seen him at other runs, and just he literally, like, there's a period he did a marathon a day, like all week, and he works a normal job, so he's getting up early, running a marathon, going to work, and then living a normal life. So much like us, right? We're doing all these hard feats and stuff, and then we kind of have a normal life, sort of. But yeah, so I gained a lot of respect for all the sports, and I learned that their mindset was all the same but different. When you're doing an endurance sport, you're having that mindset of intensity, but it has to be like stretched thinner so you can last the whole 3 hours, however many hours of endurance you have to do. In strongman, it's much more compacted to when you're doing just the event. So you're kind of working with like a finite amount of intensity. So you're trying to like gauge how much you need to throttle on that. And I think that I had always been really intense in strongman, maybe because I was a kid at first. Kids are always like, all over the place and, way too much energy at the wrong times. So over the years of between the sports and my maturity, I've been able to really focus that into when I need it in competition, and then pull back when I don't need it.
When you were talking about the time that you attempted the 100-mile marathon and, getting really humbled by the duration and the intensity of the event as a whole, it brought back a memory of myself that, some experience that I've had when I've, I haven't run any marathons, but I do enjoy climbing mountains. Not technical gear climbing, but, full on hiking. If I can scramble climb, use my hands, anything that doesn't require special harnesses and equipment, I'm good. But one of my first 14ers that I did was Longs Peak in Colorado, and I was actually talking to Brian Shaw about it on his podcast back when I did it, that, compared to, like the 1,000-pound deadlift or any of the big strongman feats of strength, none of those really quite compare in terms of what real hard was. And I felt what real hard was on that 15-hour day climbing up to the top of that mountain and back down. And so that type of very real experience, and the experience that tests your resilience, I've carried that with me through every bit of, athletic endeavor and pursuit that I've had since. Like, I know what real hard is, and this ain't it. So there is that type of, adding layers over your armor because you have dabbled in other things that really test your mettle in a different way. And I'm betting that's something that you've taken away from, your experiences in the endurance sports as well.
Yeah, I've actually seen your Instagram and stuff and seen all the hikes. I think even from just like a more normal person perspective, right? Like you want to walk with your wife and kid and stuff. Like you can't be so out of shape you can't handle like a walk down the street. So I talk about all the time. Like one of the biggest things, like for mental health and for me being in shape, is walking 3 to 6 miles a day. So I walk before the podcast. Like it's not hard, I mean, yeah, I like a three. When I was at my heaviest, like 3:30, I'm sweating more, and I live in Florida, so it's hot. But like I noticed even then, if I wasn't walking as much, I just felt like crap. And I wish I had walked more then. I had a pretty physical job, and then I took a month off before Giants Live of that main job. So my walking went down a ton, and I think that actually combined with the peaking for that contest kind of deconditioned me. It probably wouldn't have affected the contest because you know how those contests are; they're so heavy, and the only condition you need is to be able to recover between attempts and events. But it still probably would have been my benefit just overall how I felt and mentally too because it's hard to get strong. So it's always good to keep a good life perspective on, I can still walk. I don't have any kids, but like if I had kids, I want to be able to play with my kids. So yeah. And then what real hard is for sure. Every time I've done something, I keep thinking I've found like the thing, So I did like the ultra marathon on the skier for 24 hours. And I thought I did a pretty good job. Wasn't my best, but like it was hard. And then like right when you finish, you have all those endorphins. Like shoot, I could have gone 5% harder. So like looking for like even like OSG, like I had a great performance, but of course I'm not thinking of like what I did well. I'm thinking of like what I can improve upon. So I think that's something good to always seek out areas where you can be like, shoot, I could have done better, even when you do your best, or even when you do the best for that day, I should say. Yeah,
Absolutely. It's the characteristic of what builds a champion. It really
right.
is. And you got to talk about how leading back into Giants Live and how your conditioning could have maybe been different in different ways. But that brings us to a big focal point of what I want to get down and dirty with is let's talk about the big injury. What
Oh yeah.
happened? Because
Well,
many
so
of us just saw the videos and we didn't see any of leading into it behind the scenes. Describe that fateful day to us, brother.
yeah, so I mean, obviously I'm not going to forget it, but it doesn't really bother me. I mean, I've watched the injury a couple times. I didn't watch it for a while because I know that's something a lot of people don't do. Um, but yeah, so I definitely already had knee pain going in. I probably actually tore my meniscus when I was like doing like high school wrestling or something. But like most injuries that we get, they're kind of like, are they hurting or are they not hurting? So if they're asymptomatic, you're not going to just slice open your body and start replacing parts. So I was kind of of that mindset of like, as long as it's asymptomatic. So I had shifted my training some. I had done a little bit more high volume on moving events, which I did not think would have been a smart thing in hindsight because those were already kind of good events for me. Um, the axle felt good. Most people on axle, what do they think about hurting? Like, I'm just kind of curious what you think because like the main thing we think of like, when you think injuries on axle,
Oh,
you
I think
think
a
what?
bicep. That's the first thing I think of. I've torn my axle or my bicep on an axle clean before. So from personal experience, that's where it goes to. But that was not a bicep injury.
Right. So I felt like I did a really good job managing that. Like, no issue on the biceps, really conditioned there or good form. I think it's just it's kind of luck of the draw. Like the knee took one more kind of like rebound on the clean. So anyone that watches my clean style is kind of unique. I actually do a hang clean. I do that for a lot of reasons on a max. It limits the range of motion that you can have it go wrong. So if you start pulling with max force from the floor, because it's an axle, it's hard to grip. You're probably naturally going to start pulling a little bit with your biceps to keep it in your hand. And then because it's thicker and you kind of have to go around your knees, it'll get further out in front of you. So if you really accelerate it, and by floor, I mean like wherever they have us with the bar, right? If you really accelerate it past the knees and already go into your pull, a lot of guys have it too far in front of them. And if it's too far in front of them, then they're really just putting it almost like a bicep curl. Because the underhand is literally going to be in a bicep curl. And that's how I think they tear their biceps, either that or when it hits their stomach on the continental, it's off balance, which is how I kind of tore mine later on a few years later. Um, but yeah, so I'll go from the hang, I'll pop it to my stomach, and then from the stomach, I readjust my hands. I get a breath and I get a really good dip. And I think that's what makes me really good at axle is getting it to my rack position with minimal energy wasted. So I'm flipping it. I'm looking at this brick building across the street. And I remember like, everything goes so slow when you're lifting. So I like feel the axle like brush my chest at like the bottom of the clean. I'm still kind of going down to catch it, but like I feel the axle's already made contact. And I'm like, Andrew, don't rush it. Like the jerk is totally there. This thing is light as hell. Like you're gonna just smoke it. Just stand up, do the same routine. Big breath, split, done, and then we're gonna move up, go to the world record. And like right as I'm thinking that, I thought someone shot me in the knee. And at first I thought it was my knee dislocated laterally, which is common. So when I fell down, there's a picture of me. I'm actually like pushing my knee, hoping my kneecap will just like pop back in. And then after I didn't feel that, because I had heard about it in school, you just kind of like give it some pressure medially, and it usually happens when you extend your knee the next time. So I kind of did that, and when that didn't happen, I was like, oh shoot! So I rolled over, and I was like, I'm done. Like I totally wanted to get back up and try it again, even though I probably would have gotten it even if my knee didn't hurt. But yeah, I mean it was a bummer. So I had some people look at it. They obviously want me to take an ambulance to the hospital and pay out of pocket because I'm not an insured athlete. And I was like, heck no, I'm not doing that. It's 2019. I've been doing strongman for 10 years. I just got to the qualifier for World's Strongest Man. A bunch of people told me I couldn't do that. I'm in the lead, and you're going to tell me to go to the hospital. Like, nah. And so some of the powers that be of the show were like, didn't want me to continue. I have a handshake agreement that I have a competition kind of in the bag when I'm ready. Hopefully they honor that. But yeah, I mean, I want to continue because like when I put my name on the list as an athlete, I want everybody to know I'm there to the last event. So when I went pro, I told myself I never wanted to get last, and I never wanted to pull out of a show because I feel like if you get last a lot, I mean, it's going to happen eventually. I've come close. I got second to last as a pro. But if you get last a lot and you're always pulling out of shows, you probably just need to reevaluate either your training or if you should still be competing, if it's time to retire, if it's time to take a break. I'm not saying you have to quit, but those are kind of like the two determinants of like maybe my life needs to go somewhere else if those things happen. So yeah, I did not want to pull out of the show. But yeah, so I decided to continue the show. I did every event to my best of my capacity, except the deadlift, because there's no way I was going to be able to do the car with only one leg. But I did the farmers, I did the yoke, I did the stones.
I love how you said you weren't going to be able to do the deadlift with one leg, but you still did farmers, you still did yoke, still did stones. 3 events that obviously need 2 legs. But
because I had to do the farmers first. That was the first event out. And knowing how heavy the car would be compared to the farmers, yeah, it wasn't going to happen. So, I mean, I was like kind of smart. I mean, a lot of people have criticized me. I mean, I can't tell you how many people have just openly criticized that I was reckless. But it's like, you've never been in that position. And the mindset, like, I mean, this might be me bragging about myself, but just think about it. You're in a competition and somebody gets hurt and everybody wants him to lead the competition. He says no, and he wraps his knee up and goes out there. Like, imagine the mental, like mind F to other competitors. And I think people kind of have that at OSG too. I'm speaking for them, so it's maybe out of character or out of turn. But like when you see someone get hurt and you've been hurt before yourself, or you just kind of can like think, oh, that probably is really bad, and you see them come back, like it really makes you think twice about trying to beat them. I mean, that's just what it is. Like if they're bleeding and they come back out, or like they just threw up in the trash bin after, like I remember I saw JS Perone throw up in Africa after pulling the car deadlift. And then he went out and did the next event. And like, yeah, he's going to beat me. He's like super strong for my first pro show. But like seeing the intensity and then coming back and hopping under, I think we had to do a 1,200-pound yoke. So then he's warming up for a 1,200-pound yoke next. And you see him do well. It's like, oh crap, like these guys are a different breed. So it's the same thing when you get hurt. Like you want to not show weakness, but also it creates like an ongoing thing that gets branded to you, right? So everybody brands me as the guy that's going to wrap his knees up to finish the show, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. So yeah.
It's those moments of injury, or those moments where you know, like JF having to throw up before that or right after that car deadlift. When you get brought to that point of vulnerability in the face of the trial that you're about to undergo, it's almost like the animal, like in the very like picture the African savannah that gets attacked or hurt, and it knows that its life, its livelihood, its means to survive is still on the line. It kind of switches it into another gear. Like, we have to operate now. Like, this is our life. This is what means most to us. Regardless if I'm down a leg, I still got to be able to move around. And it's something that's not very easily swallowed by spectators, keyboard warriors, or people who aren't living that themselves. And I see, who I see it happen to a lot also is my buddy Evan Singleton. People love criticizing his hard-headedness, if you will. But when you are aiming with all the ambitions towards your ultimate goals, you can't, you know, with the most resilience of what's up here and where you're driving yourself to where all those external voices telling you you're doing it wrong, you're going too hard, too intense, you shouldn't jump back in, whatever it be, they just need to be quelled and silenced and pushed to the back. But
I mean,
go ahead.
it's that old man mentality. Like I think of my dad a lot. You know, he hasn't really worked out me or done strongman very much, but he's stubborn, and no one's going to tell him he can't do something. And I think just having that little mindset of like, no, I can do this, even if like the makeup of his muscle tissue and his CNS isn't primed. Like the mind controls so much that you just keep that little thing in your head, like, no, I'm going to do this. I'm stubborn. I mean, he's 65, and just not too many years ago, he lifted like a 500-pound power stair that I had just out in the garage.
Wow.
So, like, you know, somebody who doesn't train, he doesn't work a manual labor job. You know, his main stuff is like mowing the lawn and yard work. But like just mentally saying that you're tough makes you tough, and it's amazing quality to have.
I have a saying that I love giving to my athletes, and it's champion of mind, champion of body. You know, the body always goes where the mind takes it, and it's quite an amazing synchrony between the two machines of mind and body, but a very useful tool when you can be finely in tuned with how to channel it to gear towards your efforts. But with such a, well, before I go into this next question, what was the exact diagnosis of the injury that you sustained on that day?
So I tore my ACL. I I guess shredded my meniscus or whatever. I mean, some of that was already done. So meniscus, and I fractured the plateau of the tibia, probably from impact. You know, it's hard to say. Like, part of me thinks, oh, what if I did that from the other stuff I did after? But that knee was definitely. I should have had MRI sooner, but then I got in my head that I needed surgery. So it was bound to happen eventually. And who knows? Maybe one show less. Like maybe if I didn't have to do OSG to get there, maybe if I didn't have to do, or I didn't attempt that record in the backyard meet of freaking the dump that I could meet in, maybe I had the knee good for one more competition. So it's hard to say.
It's always those what ifs. But with recovering from such a dramatic injury, you know, there has to have been a lot of different shifts in mind state, or maybe there wasn't, but I know from my own personal experience, when I'm immediately confronted with that injury versus the me that comes out on the other side and is starting to feel like, hey, I'm back to where I should be, all that duration, all those miles traveled, there was a bit of a mental transformation from how the initial outlook to the eventual look back. How did that journey look for you mentally from start to finish in dealing with the injury?
Well, I'm gonna go off on a tangent first because I think that's a good point you brought up of this, like, you know, it takes a long time to come back from injury, and there's a lot of things in our heads that maybe people don't understand. So I know watching you, you know, we talked about you were in what 2015, 2016. I saw you compete at nationals. You didn't get your pro card till, or we'll say pro card, right? We don't really know how pro-ish it is, but what 2020,
2019 was when I finally got the pro card, but I had been getting close runs since 2015.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at. I'm just saying people see those numbers and they don't realize, like, because I'd followed you since then or the whole time, is all the transformation of your strength, right? Like you'd have little injuries, like you even had the knee injury recently or more recently. And so people always think of it as like linear, right? So they're always comparing you to like old Gabe, or like for me, they're comparing to old Andrew, and but they don't see like the process of the ups and downs and the amount of patience you have to like step back. I mean, you're doing a yoke walk. I remember seeing a video you doing a yoke walk. It's maybe like 500 pounds. Like, of course you can do. You're capable of doing 500 kilos, but like the patience of like knowing the body will be ready when it needs to be ready is a lesson that definitely gets learned from the injury. And I guess it's kind of the mindset is trust the ebb and the flow of the overall process. There's so many, so many people, especially clients, I'm sure, get caught up in like, I need to add 5 more pounds. I need to add 5 more pounds forever. And it just doesn't work that way.
There's so much satisfaction in, especially when you've been through the ups and downs, the ebbs and flows, where instead of thinking of ability in the terms of adding 5, 10, 15 pounds each week, there's a lot of satisfaction in doing that same load, but doing it faster, doing it feeling better, doing it with less impact, whatever it be. And it's those little tiny glimpses of progress that, for those of us that have had to undergo these trials and tribulations of recovery, that we really gain a keen eye to look for and appreciate when they do come, because they do mean it's kind of like that small step for man, giant step for mankind sort of type feel. Like these things do mean a lot in terms of progress in the grander scope. But yeah, man, I feel like that injury, especially being in the face of qualifying to World's Strongest Man, like that had to have just kind of brought things crashing down in a sense.
So before that show, that was kind of like a turning point. It was going to be a turning point in my life, regardless. It was kind of like, if I make it, I can justify pumping all the energy and effort and time and pain and discomfort into this sport. And if I don't, maybe I need to reevaluate. Kind of like along the lines of like, if I get last place, or I have to pull out because I'm either scared or injured or whatever. So it was kind of long. It was kind of put me in a weird state, because it's like, well, I was in first place and all the other events looked good, and like I know what I was capable of, and like I probably would have been high on the yoke, and I would have done good on the farmers and stones. I mean, heck, I loaded stones with only one leg. So I'm thinking, like, had I been healthy, I probably would have done well. So maybe I should justify, spending money. But now I'm hurt, and so now I'm thinking, okay, it's going to be a minimum a year, 2 years to get back. Like, is it worth another 2 years of pumping money and time into the sport? So it was definitely like a turning point. And I'm not saying I wanted to like quit. I always wanted to keep lifting, but I thought maybe I need to, like, I don't know, get other things in line first in my life. So luckily that didn't happen. I had some people that probably thought I was going to quit. I had some people that said it's okay to quit. It is, obviously I'm not going to do strongman forever. But yeah, it was tough to kind of like be so close, but yet so far. Like, I've gotten second place so many times. So like getting second place does not hurt nearly as much as like being in first and then getting hurt and knowing I could have finished the show. Like, getting second place at the Arnold Amateur to Kielikowski, like, yeah, it hurts. Like, maybe if I had focused more on that train, it's like I beat him. I go to Arnold, and he's probably a better athlete than me anyways. But like, maybe I get that shot on the Arnold stage and I step up, and now I'm one of the guys in the pro circuit, right? All these what ifs. But like, losing him and then seeing him become such a great like athlete, and like knowing that like he capitalized on it, is also kind of rewarding as well. It's easier to take. But for me to like be in first place and then get hurt, I never got to realize like the end of the show. So if I got into the show and gotten fourth, I'd be like, okay, I was off the podium, I didn't deserve it. Okay, fine. But I really don't know, because I didn't finish it. So it'll always kind of be like an open-ended what if in my mind.
That lack of closure in one of the most painful senses, it's tough. But it's, what about, so with all that realization of in that very moment, compared to now, coming back from it, how did that growth feel, looking back on, okay, I was in this place, this moody, maybe not so good place, like not getting that closure that I needed, but now I'm back on the precipice of being able to chase the things that I originally set out to do. You are sitting now with a crown on top of your head, recently earned. Right. How does that feel in retrospect, looking back?
I think so. I won in 2017 the 105, and then I won in 2022. That's what we're talking about. So 5 years. Mm-hmm. It seems like a restart. I'm working with a little bit older body, but it's like a restart. So like the ways, and this is like full circle. So like how I was living my life, like what my business was like, what my relationship was like, how I was training, it's all a restart. So I kind of compared to 2017. Probably was a better athlete, probably was a little stronger, but I'm like smarter, wiser, maybe a little less angry. I get along with people, there's other areas I made improvements. So that's kind of, I'm hoping this 2022 win is kind of like a jump start to kind of like repeat the process. I'm not saying I'm going to do open OSG next year. I'm just saying like that was kind of like the jump start that started OSG to the Giants Live to the almost getting there. But yeah, I mean, it feels good. It'll never feel as good as making it the world's strongest man. I mean, I don't mean to knock the 105 titles, but it just never will. I mean, that's what I never thought I would do 105 when I got into strongman. And when I was competing as an amateur, it was kind of like, I mean, it is a subclass, but it was like a more subclass. It was like, okay, there's some guys that cut weight. It was never like the thing people talked about. And so now it's obviously much more popular, and there's much more opportunities, and everybody should be blessed for that. It's just that was never my intention from the get-go. And I'm built bigger. I mean, I really do think I'm built to be maybe a lighter side, heavyweight strongman and do well. It's just I'm also blessed with being able to be light and be fast. So I'm kind of in between.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that 2022 serves as a reaffirmation as to, you are where you belong. And I'm even more glad to know that in the scope of these 5 years between, your initial victory in 2017 and now in 2022, that there was a lot more growth, not just in the very direct sense of strength, but also mental strength, strengthening, like you said, the relationships, your outlook on life, your disposition, your business. And that's invaluable, man, because that gives you a very strong foundation to build off of for whatever shape 2023 takes. And that's a very powerful thought to think. Um, I do want to touch base on some of the allure of the 105 middleweight class and a little bit later on in the conversation. But still on that topic of injury, what would injury mean like for you now? You know, God forbid that happens. And this is something that I'll answer at the same time too. But if you were to get injured now with everything that you've learned, how hardened your metal has become, especially with injuries you've had to overcome to this point, what would it mean like to you if you got injured now?
I think back to kind of like the book Obstacle is the Way. Like you're always going to have another injury. And it's funny if you follow like older guys in strongman, they're always getting hurt, right? Oh, I kind of pulled my tricep. Oh, I kind of pulled my lat. And as a younger kid coming into the sport, I was like, man, these guys are a mess. Like, they're not stronger than me. I was already relatively strong by like 19, 20 years old. So I'm like, these guys aren't that strong. And, they're always getting hurt. They must not be training right. But the reality is eventually your body's going to kind of fight back against you. But the thing I've noticed from a lot of those veteran competitors, because some of them are still around from when I started strongman to now. So they've trained longer than me before I started. And now it's another 15 years. So they're doing it 20 years. Is they just are stubborn and they just like, okay, I got another injury, and they find a way to work around it, and they keep going to the gym and they keep eating. And, a lot of them are smarter with like all the recovery means, they know a lot more about their body. So you get all the body work done. But the fact is they keep doing it. And I think that's kind of my mindset now is it's like, I'm not saying I'm like, I'm looking forward to the next injury, but I'm kind of looking forward to that next obstacle, because if something happens, I just have to find a way to get around it. Like even before I did Clash earlier in the year, I pulled something in my tricep and I could barely press the log without pain. And I just was like, all right, I guess so here I am, like my knee was hurting. So I'm not doing moving events. So I'm trying to push my pressing events. And then my pressing events, I kind of overtrain them, I guess, or, something weird happened. So I pull that. So it's just a constant like, okay, what can we focus on to get better? So then luckily my moving events kind of started feeling better. So I started to push those, pull back on the press. It's just constant reevaluation of where can we put the energy to get the end product. So I hope I stay healthy, but if something happens, I'm just going to move the energy around. I'm just going to move the focus. And sometimes that might move it to life. If I get hurt and I'm laid up for 2 weeks, I know now I'm not going to waste my time watching movies and screwing around. I have other goals I can accomplish if I get hurt, like really, really bad.
Yeah. And I can relate to giving a similar answer. It's an understanding that with the territory of the sport comes the potential for injury. That's just the reality of it. And we have both been following this pursuit for long enough to know that we will get banged up along the way, even if we essentially are doing everything right. Something might just, a bad luck of the draw, a slanted foundation that you're lifting on, a little pebble under your foot, whatever it may be, something can go wrong. So I like to think of all of the experience gained from the start of this journey till now. There have been a lot of tips, a lot of tricks, a lot of knowledge, a lot of recovery, rehab tools gained to where, in the unfortunate circumstance that if I do get hurt, I at least have all these years of knowledge and an abundance of knowing to just really give it my best effort to get back on the ball. Because to be totally honest, even just this year alone has been riddled with little injuries here and there, and nothing that's going to take me away from the ultimate goal of wanting to become the world's strongest man, but things that do require like, hey, let's take a step back, let's reevaluate, get back to the drawing board. Let's, like you said, let's reallocate the energy to where this muscle or this joint that's aching, let's take some of the focus and the frequency in which we really stress it out and maybe shift those towards things that could be using our focus a little bit more. Let's get away from doing deadlifts 2 times a week, and now let's focus on the pressing or the moving events a little bit more. But there is always that weight in terms of when you do get hurt, how much does this affect life outside of the gym, life outside of strongman? Because if you can't be a good human, and I mean that in the sense of being a functional human, then you've lost the allure of the beauty of this precious gift that we have as life itself. And for me, that takes a little bit different of a meaning too, because you talked about this earlier on, is I've got a child to keep up with. If I can't hold her, I think of, last week I did some deadlifts where I just pushed really hard and I didn't hurt myself, but my back, locked up on me. It was like, that's it. Nothing more for today. You're done. Let's wait for the next session. And I woke up the next day after sleeping just having to hold myself because I was so stiff I couldn't stand up all the way. And even though I loosened up throughout the day, there was that moment of like, wow, If I can't pick up my daughter from her crib and stand back up after, then this is a problem. But we have gained a lot of, like I said, a lot of tools to mitigate that risk and address it when it does happen. What useful recovery knowledge specifically, or special things that you would put into your recovery regimen if you got hurt, have you been equipped with now through your experience? What works for Andrew Clayton?
So I'll go a little more broad just so it hits more of the audience.
Mm-hmm.
So when I look at it like endurance sports knowledge, maintain some aerobic base, like we talked about, going for walks, something basic. Get on the spin bike at least 1 to 3 times a week. When I look at, like, say, bodybuilding, they're so robotic in their eating. It's maintaining an eating regimen which needs to have all the vitamin. You need to eat well. I think some strongmen eat better than others, and that kind of goes to show. And it's something you do every day. So you don't train every day, you eat every day. Same with sleep. When I look at powerlifting, they're only doing 3 lifts, and they have to be super precise, just like weightlifting, right? They have to be super precise. So focusing on really good technique. And then looking at strongman is understanding the events and how often you need to train them. So that kind of like comes before the injury, right? Like understanding like how things recover, but taking all those into a whole and then looking at the rehab. So for rehab, it's maintaining full range of motion in at least one movement, trying to train in all different planes of motion, being in shape, like I talked about aerobically, so I'm never going to if I gain weight quickly, I need to make sure my aerobic markers fit. So if I'm getting out of breath on my 3-mile walk in the morning, then maybe I'm gaining too quickly. If I'm getting up and my feet are hitting the floor and I feel pain in my knees, then maybe I overtrained or I'm gaining weight too quickly, those types of things. The rehab stuff, yeah, so maintain full range of motion, all planes of motion, eccentric work. It's hard to really put one thing, because I feel like when you put one thing, you're telling a person they need to do that, but there's different phases for it. But I really do think after every contest, you need to go back, you need to do more aerobic work. You need to do things that were outside the movement patterns you were previously doing. So if you were hitting log a lot, you need to change that. If you were doing tons of bilateral squatting, go to unilateral. If you're doing tons of yoke, maybe don't do yoke and do something where you carry more interior focus. Shifting it so you're never overtrained the same movement all the time, I think is a big thing that I promote. And good coaches, like I work with Mike Westerling, like he's constantly talking about rotating those stressors. And I think the fine line is finding which things you need to rotate and which things you need to have be more the same to be able to improve your form. And once you find kind of like the mix that's good for you, that's how you develop a program that's going to allow you to train for a long time without getting like just completely beat up from doing yoke walk 4 weeks in a row or something crazy,
Yeah. What I really love about your response to what I asked you was how you covered the bases of everything that should be ever present in your weekly routine. And that's something that people often overlook. They're looking for that one thing that they can add, or that magic fix. Whereas the reality is, when you get done with contests, especially, you have been training things with specificity leading up to that event, that where when you're done, you're at a point where your body has been without this very comprehensive, full spectrum sort of treatment in terms of its fitness, its nutrition, its recovery. So things like going the aerobic capacity, going on the walks, going on the bike, things like making sure you're up with your supplementation in terms of vitamins and minerals every day, proper hydration, eating your vegetables, whatever it is, keeping that balance within the body is often one of the best tools to have in your arsenal at combating injury, at preventing it, at coming back from it, recovering, and just staying overall great feeling. It's one of the hardest things to do, though, because we get so caught up in the rhythms of, well, I've already got this next contest set. It's 3 months away, but I've got the yoke that I need to train in.
It's the phase model of always being caught up in contest prep.
Yeah.
And I Paul Smith about it, and it's kind of the opposite. Some guys are always caught up in accumulating volume. So they're always caught up in doing like 8 sets of the moving event. But guess how many sets you do in the competition? 1. So like there are guys at OSG that probably would have beat me if we had to do the yoke like 10 times, but we wanted to do it once. And so I think it's always having an idea of what phase you're in. So when you come out of a contest, you're going to have a wider base. It's not going to be very much into one event. You're moving all these different patterns that you'll never do. Like I'm doing rotational movements now that unless I have like a 150-pound keg, I'm going to like side toss onto the platform. I'm never going to use it. But as it gets closer to the contest, I narrow it down to like the events and like one accessory per event. So you're talking, I mean, when I work with Mike, he literally gives me like 1 or 2 accessories a day, and I'll add an extra one because that's my personality, but very minimal, you know. So people need to realize you build the base, and then when you peak it, it needs to be so tiny that you literally can't be good at other things. Then right after, you need to go back wide again, and you keep doing that process over and over and over and over.
Brother, I hope our athletes are listening to this because I'm sure you have them too. The athletes, as soon as they get done with their contest, they're ready to get into the next one, and they're like, "Well, why is my training so well rounded, or why isn't it focused on the events that I have 12 weeks from now?" And it's, I'm sure you know that struggle, but it's the best way to keep the body healthy and to stay a good human. But in terms of recovery and rehab techniques that have worked well for me over time, a lot of the, and again, it's not putting one single thing, but any recovery mode or mean of promoting more circulation, especially to the traumatized areas or the areas that are hurting. Usually a lot of the pain or the ache comes from something that's just so inflamed that the channels in and out are very restricted. If you can even go on, just like going on a walk or doing some band rows or putting on an E-stim machine to your affected muscle and getting some passive muscular contractions, anything that really promotes a good and nourishing environment for healing, that's usually one of the best things that you want to check off before you start trying to do anything a little bit more intrinsic. But that's a big piece of advice, at least I have on my outlook over injury, knowing that, you know, over the past year, a lot of that focus has been a knee injury, something very far away from the origin of the body. One of the biggest priorities there is let's get some circulation to that area that's just very distal to the heart itself. But enough on the injury stuff. Let's talk about something more fun. OSG was a big win for you, brother. It was a big win, and I know you've won it before, but for a lot of us that were watching you, it was really good to see you come back and just you were wreaking confidence at every turn. But after your victory, you said, "Don't call it a comeback. I never left." I want you to talk about that.
So I mean, so people kind of wrote me off after 2019, and it's one thing to write me off for like open class because you know how open class is. You got to be on point. You know, you can't show up if your best deadlift's 1,000. You can't show up at 90% because you're just gonna you do 880 and you're in last place, right? That's what the deadlift championship is, right? 880 is the opener. So you show up 90%. That's you're used to in the opener. So yeah, so open class you got to be on point. 105 is competitive, but where I'm at is the 105. I've always been at the top. I've always podiumed. Everything I've ever done at 105, I've podiumed. I've broken world records. So I wasn't invited to some shows, and one of the justifications was like, "Oh, you're injured," as if I'm like no longer active. And I was kind of like didn't like that, and people kind of wrote me off as like, "Oh, because you haven't competed." It's like, dude, I still train. I mean, one time I was doing bodybuilding training 6 days a week, so like, I was training actually more frequently, built up more volume, and in some ways I was in better shape than I was doing strongman training because as we talked about, you know, you're peaked. So like you're actually like I get a little softer towards the end of the peak. You know, stuff like that. But yeah, so that kind of bothered me because like for me, I haven't missed a week of training since I started. The longest I ever taken off was maybe a week where I did like one active recovery session. So the gym is like what I do. So I've never left the gym. So in my mind, I've never left preparing for a strongman competition. So that's kind of what like the underlying thing is. Then everybody is expecting a comeback, and you know I wanted it to happen in 1 year. I've seen some impressive comebacks before. Sean DeMarinis came back after getting injured in 2017 and won 2018. Different injury, but same general story. So I'm thinking, oh well, I'm a good athlete like Sean. I should be able to do the same. And that didn't happen. So the comeback in my mind was like I was already back. You know what I mean? I'm already training. I'm already doing it. So that was kind of like my slap in the face to like, oh, I was gone, huh? You know, here's my $1 poster my dad picked up from the store, and I wrote with Sharpie on.
Well, your prep, so especially in the spirit of never being gone, your prep leading up to the official Strongman Games seemed to have been on point, judging by your performance. How was it in those 3 months leading up to it? Was there anything that you felt was like extra, just right on, or things that you felt were lacking, or was it just like a smooth cruise all the way through?
No, there were definitely areas where it was lacking. I think if the events were a little different, maybe I didn't. Well, I'd like to believe I could win on almost any mix of events, but that show didn't have a max event. I mentioned this on other podcasts. So that kind of takes away the guys that are just like real static monsters. It didn't have anything with like a clean and press. I mean, the dumbbell doesn't really count. It's a unilateral movement. So I might have lost points there because just kind of getting over some injury stuff. And for reps can be different than for a max, obviously. But no, my process kind of started. So I did 2009. No, I'm sorry, 2000. What year are we in? I did 2021. I did bodybuilding, and so that kind of built a base. And then earlier this year, I did a local show in heavyweight that I had done in the past, kind of just like to make sure my mind was right. I didn't need a refresher. It was more just like if I fail, I'd rather fail at a local show. Then I did Clash. So by Clash, I was like kind of getting things together. Like as I mentioned earlier, uh, moving events were hard to train. So by August, September, I kind of sorted out what I could handle on moving events, and that helped me the strategy for OSG. Pressing, like I said, I was still beat up and a little bit injured, and I hadn't done circus dumbbell for 3 years. So that was an event that I had to bring the technique up pretty quick. But the loading and stuff, I felt like I was in good shape. It's always been a strong event. So I think between my thoughts and Mike Westerling's thoughts on some of the programming, kind of combining the best of both worlds, I was happy with it as a whole. Obviously, I could have snuck out a little bit more here or there. I was surprised a little bit by the yoke, just because I had never done a car yoke, and the heaviest I went in training was actually lighter than the contest weight. So I was just healthy was the goal. Healthy was the goal, and hold back. I only have one training partner that really trains with me at all, and he saw it, and I'm sure, and he was there too. But like I tell him all the time, it's like we're training for the contest, so he's a lot like me, and like he has a lot of speed, And I tell him a lot of times, like, no, focus on the stability of the yoke, like focus on the pick, so that it's going to be stable when we add another 100 pounds, because everybody can run fast when it's 80% of their max. Like, what happens when it's it is your max, or we're at the weight we're going to do for the contest? So I was probably surprised. I hit markers exactly where I wanted to on farmers, sandbag, dumbbell, little errors. I should have been faster. Yoke was faster than I thought. Stones, I don't know how the heck I missed the last one. I watched it back with your commentary, and you're totally right. I should have pulled it higher. Viking press was roughly where I thought it would be, but that's so hard to judge because no one knows the weighted hand exactly. And Nick Hine is super strong, and I kind of thought he might beat me out on that based on his Instagram training and stuff like that. So as a whole, I kind of hit every marker where I should have been.
It's a sign of a good prep, regardless if we can always really dissect how things could have been better, but you brought the package there. And I see you train a lot, mostly out of your garage, right?
Yeah. It's my parents' garage. I moved into a new house. I'm trying to get the gym finished. And then the gym I was sort of kind of training at indoors here went out of business. I know moving gym equipment around, it's not fun.
Oh man, I never want to move another gym out of in my entire life. I tell you that.
Yeah, I still got to move mine, and I'm like, if you've ever trained with me, please show up. It just, but yeah. So I did most of the moving events at a storage unit, which luckily was like really cool with me training there. Just the slope of the ground, it has to drain, and it was the opposite. I'm used to it crowning, so I'm used to my foot rolling out, and my foot was rolling in. That's one reason why I couldn't do yoke super quick. And even farmers was weird. It's like I was like on a trying to like balance, because if I walked too much to the left or right, it rolled me back towards the middle. But yeah, so it was tough. But as I tell people, and I talked to Nick Hine about, is like he trained on gravel, and like when you train in like a little bit more adverse conditions, it's not always going to be the best. Like ideally, you're training indoors, flat ground, you can really get a good time. You're on the contest equipment. But like when you just say whatever, I'm going to do it, that helps you a lot when you get to like an OSG type competition, when you don't get to warm up on the car yoke, or you don't get to do X, Y, or Z, and then everything is going to be faster. So like I think I did 880-pound yoke for like 60 feet in like 15 seconds, and I literally just do a math equation. I say I'm going to be like at least 10 to 15% faster. So like I assumed I would hit just under 12 seconds, maybe a little bit faster than that, and then obviously I broke 10. But like I have a rough gauge of what adverse conditions equal in contest. So even on the farmers, I didn't focus on the speed. I focused on being able to turn around quick and be able to start quick. And those things I think paid off more than people that focus just on pure indoor track speed on those.
Yeah, and being able to handle and toggle between different training environments, that can really add a new facet of strength to the individual's mind. Especially when it comes to the scope of contest day, we get there to contest, and very few things are in our direct control. We always have to be able to adapt on the fly to whether it's rules that have to change to a hurricane or whether it's limited warm-ups or changing equipment, whatever it be. That even when, as hard as it can be sometimes to not be training in the same environment with everything to your exact liking, if you can become malleable and adaptable enough to, of course, first of all, know that when you go to a different training environment, you're not going there to set, your all-time best performance, because this is not your home. This is not something that you've been accustomed to. But you know that you're going in to train, to become better, to become stronger, to adapt to whatever you have, and to be able to do it well and not be overcome in the head with all this cloudiness of like, oh, I don't have this, I don't have that, this isn't the way I like it, the ground sloped, whatever it is. It creates another type of resilience, and that is a very, very invaluable tool when it comes time to really pushing your bounds of strength when it matters most on the field and contest day. And I think that as hard as it is to deal with those changing training environments, there is that level of comfort in knowing that we become really able at training in these adverse situations, to where no matter what you throw at us, we can do well. And there's that strongman is one of those things where the sport itself, the essence of, you can have a list of thousands of different events, whatever they be. They can change in shape, they can change in time, in duration, in weight. You want to be adaptable. Whatever life throws at you, you want to be able to handle it. And I think that's something that you and I especially can relate to, that it plays into our book. It really does. But in terms of training alone, or go ahead.
You can complain about it. That's fine as long as you do the work.
Yeah,
I,
yeah.
I like I, yeah, like I complain about those things, and my clients train on storage units and they train on equipment that I'm like, dude, I don't think that's safe. But like, you can complain about it, but then know that you're doing something harder. And it also kind of gives you like an FU type thing of like, you see your competitors training with the ideal and maybe even being blessed to train on the contest equipment. And that, I don't know about you, but that motivates the heck out of me. If you've gotten to train on the contest equipment, I consider you being favorited or having an advantage. And I want to make sure you understand that like, you don't have an advantage. I'll train harder in the gravel on the storage unit with the pit bull yoke that's shaking 360 degrees, just to make sure that didn't help you at all. And that's really cocky of me, but I think we all think that in our heart of hearts. We want to, yeah, we want to show
I'm right
them
there with you on that. Let's really stick it to those people who get to go get their hands on the exact contest event. What's it like training alone? Because there's definitely pros and cons, and I'm training alone right now too. It's actually something that I've wanted to do for a while. I felt like I closed down my gym a couple months ago because I was not able to really focus on myself as much as I wanted to. And I got into this. I started walking this path to become the world's strongest man, not to become a gym owner. And that was kind of that ultimate realization that led me to closing it down. But it's tough, man. It is tough sometimes to train on one's own. We have to be our own very direct sense of push and motivation. And we always have to have our focuses aligned with, where they're aimed to, and not getting caught up in laziness or whatever. What has training alone been like for you over, let's just talk about this last year. How has that been?
So I actually got a message. I tried to post on Instagram about this, but Instagram did not like me. And someone messaged me asking, was it like train alone? How do you bring that intensity to training? I'm used to maxing out with people, and then also when I go to contests, I'm not able to like bring that same intensity. That's what the person asked me. And so I kind of thought on it because I'm like, well, yeah, that's true. I always bring the intensity and I train by myself. I think a lot of people frame it as a negative. So that's like the first thing. They frame it as a negative because we're supposed to be a culture. We all train together. And that would be great. But sometimes it's not practical. We're in an area, it's not practical, whatever. So I see it as a positive. I see it as I get to be in my own head, and therefore I can focus a lot on technique. So my technical events, I really don't want people around me because chances are they're not going to coach me. They're going to distract me. And especially if we're sharing the same bar or implement or whatever. When it comes to the fact that I'm training alone, I also know that this is like the baseline. So in other words, the amount of arousal I have is going to be there on contest day because I'm going to be there. Like I'm going to be there, but my training partners might. I mean, I know my dad's probably going to come to most shows, but he's not training with me. Some of my handlers might come, but they might not be there for all 3 days or 2 days or whatever. So it really kind of sets your baseline. So, hey, I can always add a little bit more once I get, people who are there supporting me and all that kind of stuff. As far as like intensity, I think it's good to learn how to be intense by yourself because again, you get that arousal. The only negative I see is, like you said, be able to start the workout. So there are times that like I schedule myself to start the workout at 4:30. 4:30 rolls around. Now it's 4:35. Now it's 4:40. I'm like slowly getting, down to my garage or out to the gym. And maybe I take an extra, a little longer warm up. Like sometimes I even go for a walk before I start warming up just to get out of my head from work or my laziness, just get moving. And I think that helps a lot. So maybe you waste a little bit of time in your warm up because when you're held accountable by other people, you should be there on time. Not every training partner is, but you should be on time for your training partners. Where you can utilize training with people should really be on things where they're going to provide a benefit. So I do have a couple choice people that I allow train. I say allow because like I control my environment. So one of the people I allowed to train with me, John, he's really new to strongman. He's actually one of my clients, but he has a coaching mindset. He comes from rugby, so he actually gave me feedback on the bag. I'm doing the sandbag to shoulder, and he gets to see it in real time. I get to see it on a video. So he's giving me cues. That's beneficial. He helps me move the bags to get set, so I'm not wasting my energy. Okay, that's beneficial. So when you're looking at train alone, you need to also evaluate who you're training with and the environment. So if the people aren't adding to your training and they're just merely in the background, or worse, you're having to coach them. So take a break from you and coach them, probably not going to be good. And then even when you can have the best equipment in the world, if you're in an environment that's negative or has a bad vibe, like it's just not worth it. So I know when I'm training by myself at the storage unit or in a garage, no one's there that I don't like. And no one's there that's ever created a bad vibe because I'm the only energy in the room. And I think a lot of people will go to gyms where like there's too much drama in the sport anyways, but they don't like everyone, or, there's like little rivalries or stuff like that. And that's, yeah, you're on great equipment, but at what cost? At what cost to your emotional or mental well-being are you to be around those people? So I think just take inventory of, of who's around you and how well those people are helping you will also benefit you to be able to train alone.
It's funny to hear you talk about the walks you take before you even start warming up. I do the exact same thing. Like sometimes you just need that. It's almost meditative, like to clear your mind of everything that's led up to that point and to realign that focus of like, this is what I'm about to do. Let's get these pistons firing off. But the essence of the sport, and especially when I talk to a lot of people, like what the coolest thing about strongman is, it's always the unique diamond in the rough appeal of how the camaraderie is present, especially on contest day. How you can have your number one rival be also the person who's cheering you on at the top of their lungs. But that is unique to contest day. When we get down to the essence of the sport, this is a very, self-driven endeavor. And you get out what you put into it, and that goes into how much you're able to gear in towards the efforts of your training. And if you're in a training environment where the efforts that you're putting in are not just going into yourself, they're being leaked to other people, possibly having to coach them, direct them, waste your energy interacting with them. Well, now we take away from the essence that is this sport of self-driven. Like you have to create it yourself, and that's where I think training on one's own, sure, it can be tough for a lot of times, but it is a direct contribution to that final picture that we're so desperately trying to build to the best of our abilities. And it's tough to do. The people who feed off of the energy of others are not going to do well training on their own. They're going to have a lot of difficulty getting that drive to kickstart their workout. But the people who, at night, they're thinking about where that ultimate goal is as the last thing before they go to bed. And I say that figuratively, of course, but the ones who always have that very aligned laser tuned focus are going to be the ones that can push themselves through those hard garage workouts, when no one else is looking, when you are accountable for every little bit only on your own. But from such a powerful ability to train on your own and to gear your focus towards, every pursuit that you have, especially this last one, like I said earlier, when we started talking about OSG, you never were without confidence throughout any of the events, at least from where I saw, from where the other spectators saw from our point of view. You built what seemed to be one of the most powerful versions of yourself. How are we able to do that? I mean, there has to have been a lot of layers to adding this confidence up through your training that led to that one pinnacle performance. What do you attribute that to?
I mean, a lot of it's experience. I mean, I think the sport, all strength sports have gotten very much populated, and I'm sure the average length of people in the sport's gone down now because it's so popular. And there's so much said for experience and just doing things so many times. Like on the farmers, a lot of people were using liquid chalk, numerous different brands. And so there was probably a wetness to the farmers, I think. And so I went up there, and people don't even know like the little things. So my dad has two towels on his shoulder when he's walking around. One's my sweat towel, and one's my dry things off. It touches nothing but what needs to be dried off. So I don't use the same towel. So like I went up there with a towel that's fresh and dried off and wiped off the farmers as they were setting it up, because that's someone else's liquid chalk I'd never used. And there's just so many things that like you have to know. And there's that rule of like, don't change things come contest day. And that applies to a lot of people. But then once you get experience, you have to know based on your prior competitions, like when you can change it. So I talked to Nick Hine again. I think it was great. He'd asked me so many questions. I respect him so much, but he tore his hand, and he asked me what, like, should he wear a glove or not wear a glove? And I recommended a glove, spray it on, make sure it's not going to move, you have it taped down. So he wore one glove on the sandbag. He didn't want to do that, but he had to do it. He never trained like that, but my contest experience said it would be in his best interest to do that. And so that's where it was helpful to me, or that would be where it helpful to me, because I've done so many different contests and I've worn so many different pieces of equipment and kit and all that kind of stuff. I can make a change on the day of what I'm wearing and know how it's going to react. Other people, they could change their elbow sleeves and it throws off the rack position, So yeah, it comes down to experience and just knowing the sport, knowing the speed of things, knowing like your own abilities. I know moving events I don't want to say, it sounds really cocky. I know moving events to where if I can hear the time to beat, I can kind of gauge how fast I need to do the start. So when I knew the yoke was 11, I knew I had to do basically what I did in training, because I was estimating 11 or 12 seconds. Had the best time on yoke been like 15 seconds, I would have come out kind of slow, because I knew once I picked it up, there's no way it's going to take me 15 seconds to walk to the other end. So that allows me to kind of take less risk. And you see that the most with Big Z. Big Z knows exactly what time he's going to get on every event. He's on, he won just barely, right? But he won because he did the exact amount of effort on every event. And that's because he's experienced, not because he's his healthiest, not because he's his strongest, because he's the most experienced competitor on the field. And I tried to emulate that as best I could by my own experience in those events and over competitions.
And it shows, brother. It really shows. What did it feel like to earn this title again for the second time here 5 years later?
It definitely felt better. It was more publicized, and I like all the video and the production. So the first time only my dad could come. So this time my mom, my dad, and one of my brothers came, and then most of my brothers watched on the live stream, which was a much better production. And a lot of it honestly has to do for your commentary was on point. I listened to it and I was like, man, I did not know he did that good a commentary.
Oh, thank you, brother. I had a lot of fun doing it.
Yeah, because I'm a critic for the sport, and we've all heard bad commentaries in strongman, so we know what it sounds like. And I'm just like expecting the worst. I'm like, man, he's really good. He knows some of the people. He's the cadence of your speech. So yeah, awesome job on the commentary. That helped a lot. Helped a lot with the experience of the people for sure.
Are there any specific or any special moments from the competition that, aside from winning itself, that you want to share?
Trying to think what was like a real. I think. Well, I mean, I celebrate on some of the events. It just feels good to hit things like.
I was gonna say, you kind of straddled a sandbag and started spanking it, didn't you? That was pretty special.
Originally, I was gonna show the farmers and hump the sandbag, but I reversed it, changed it. But yeah, I mean, I try to be an entertainer because I know that's part of the value of being a strongman. I did not find the camera nearly as good as some of the other people can find the camera. I don't know what I was doing. I think one part, okay, this is good because I think the car walk, like I said, was probably like the biggest surprise. I did not think I was going to break 10. I mean, I knew I was capable of it, but it's the first time doing it, and I dropped it. So Romark came up and mic'd me, and I said, "Oh, are you mic'ing me because I'm going to win this event?" And like, this is the final, so like I'm already in the lead. He's like, "Maybe," and I just took that to heart. I was like, "Romark, you are going to eat those words." And so then I did the run. And you might see it in the feed. I'm pulling up so he can hear in the mic for sure. And I'm like, maybe. So it was all good play, and it was all good play with Romark. But it's those little things when you just make an event click, and that start was just so good. And honestly, other than that drop, that was probably one of the best yoke walks I've ever done. So that was kind of surreal for all 9.8 seconds.
That's awesome, man. When with the the high feelings of this victory. Was there any moments throughout the contest where any of the former injuries that you've had kind of haunted you, whether it's mentally or physically?
Yeah, I mean, I'm human like everyone else, even though I have experience and done it more. You know, I still had that after day one. I had that little thing creep in my head where I was like, man, like what if I have gotten strong enough to where I can pull something again? Or like, what if I shift the weight and the stones? Because I do shift my right leg on stones. It's just how my technique is. Like, what if I pull my hamstring again? And I thought about it a couple times, and I just kind of had the process. Like, Andrew, no. Like, if you go in there thinking you're going to do it, you're more likely you're going to pull to your right leg and you're going to pull it, or you're going to shift your form into a way that you haven't conditioned your body, and now you're going to get hurt. So it was really just turn off the inhibition. I definitely felt a little bit of pain here and there, but luckily I've always been good at blocking it out for whatever the time frame of the competition is. Then you heard a little bit after maybe.
So thinking about the car walk especially, you knew what time you had to be, and you knew that you're going to have to turn on the gas because this was going to be right along the times that you were really hitting in training and really having to push for it. When you're confronted before that whistle blows and it's start time, when you're knowing you have to really try and you're like, this person did this, I have to give it my all here. And then if those negative voices of what ifs, like, oh, what if you stumble? What if you drop it? Like all those bad what ifs start eking their way into your head. How do you quell them in that moment? I would like to hear how you say it, but also all the audience out there. When those negative what ifs start coming into your mind right before the whistle blows, what do you use to kind of put them aside and silence them?
I don't think anything comes in like by that point I'm in. Like
Okay.
that point I'm in. So I think what we had the sandbag and then we had to get the heights, the car walk. So there's a little bit of like, I don't want to say negative voices, but that uncertainty, that nervousness. So I actually picked the car up in 2021 when I was as a spectator just to feel it. I think it was like 590 empty, they said. So I picked up in warm-ups and did a couple like short, like 15-foot things, and I could pick it up with a stagger stance, which is something I can only do with speed yoke. And at 590, like it's heavy enough to like, you feel it, but it felt like air. And I was like, shoot, I'm peaked. Like either they're lying about the weights, which can happen. I don't think Lynn does, but I'm saying it can't happen. Or I'm just like really healthy. And so once I picked that 590 up and I picked it up and I felt like a spring in a stance that I prefer to use. I don't like having my feet in the normal stance if I'm trying to be speed. I was just like, all right, well, we're going to go with that stance. I had trained that stance up to like 700, 750 with a really low pick just in case. So I felt confident. It was really based on the feeling of the warm. So when I went out there, it was really just try to create as much of a spring under that car and time that whistle. And if you watch it, you can actually see I almost get the car to hover before I pick it. I kind of like pull the slack out of the car before he blew the whistle. So I think that allowed me to have a really fast start. And then of course my left foot's like 4 inches in front. So I had a lot of confidence just based on how that 590 felt. And then a lot of people might think, oh, I dropped it because maybe I had a negative voice or whatever. Honestly, like sometimes you get going so fast on yoke, it's almost faster to like drop it where you're dropping it versus like drop it when you weren't expecting it because then you can't pick it up as quick. So I kind of like felt the reverberation of it kind of bounce back, and I saw the line. I'm like, yeah, I can't dive to the line yet, so I'm just going to do a quick drop, and I almost like follow the car down faster than it goes down, so then I can catch it and pop it up. I don't train that by any means. It's just kind of like an instinct. Once you've done yoke enough, like you don't have many more feet left at this speed. You better go ahead and just like readjust.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Um, you're talking about watching Big Z operate and how his performance is based off of his massive experience in the sport. And of course, thinking about all the miles that you traveled, both in the sport, in recovery, and in victories, in loss. What has changed in the way that you do things now, whether it's competing, training, just going about your life as a strongman, versus how you did them as a younger version of yourself in the past? Is there anything that starkly comes to mind when I ask you that?
I think we're all guilty of probably putting too much emphasis on it. So like it obviously consumes my life. Like I coach athletes. I eat the 6 meals a day. So that's kind of like the thing that like guides what time I wake up and go to bed, all that kind of stuff. But I'm so much more relaxed now. And when it comes to training, especially for 105, I mean, I've done 1,200-pound yoke. So like the chances of me ever needing to like touch a heavy yoke for that 105 class is slim. So I really it's just the basics. I feel really comfortable on cruise control for the 105 class on the basics. And I know that I don't need to be all consumed by it. Like, as long as I'm walking, I'm eating healthy, I'm getting sleep, I'm staying in a positive mindset. I train 3 or 4 times a week and just make small incremental progress. I'm never going to be a guy again that can like handle a ton of volume on moving events, but I'm blessed with the fact that when I do have a good training cycle, I can be really fast. So until that changes, until like my natural, I don't know what you want to call it, intensity or speed, maybe I start to lose my speed in another 5-10 years, then maybe I change how I train. But I'm just way more chill. I used to spend way much more time mentally thinking about training, training itself, just everything. And now I pretty much don't think about training until maybe like the pre-workout meal. And then once I'm done with that, the post-workout meal, I usually just sit back on my computer and I can work or be kind of out of that zone a little bit sooner. The only negative is, of course, is I'm still thinking about strongman because I have strongman athletes that I work with. But yeah, I'm definitely more in tune with like enjoying life, like especially like eating after. I've been eating a little bit more junk food. I've been, we obviously had the holidays coming up. I'm not stressed about it. I'm going to eat some pie and do this. I'm just in a really good cruise control to obviously achieve the best of the best. If you want to be world's strongest man, which I've never said I was going to be, you can't do that. But to be pretty freaking close, you can. So I think some people are guilty of going too much into the sport too soon, and they start ruining, the relationships or their work or their life-work balance or whatever you want to call it. You don't need to do that until you're like in your position. I'm not saying you do that, but like your goal is to become world's strongest man. So at some point you're going to have to make those tough decisions that other people wouldn't be willing to make. And I've made a couple times in my life, but for most people in strongman, you should probably not consider, those types of decisions. Like crazy things like taking a month off work to train for a competition. Like you probably shouldn't do that unless you're really gaming for the top.
Yeah, and hearing everything that you're talking about right now too, it sounds like in the years of your life that have led to now, like you've become very effective at finding more balance. And I recall you saying it earlier on in our conversation that now you're a lot less angry. What exactly do you mean by that?
So I grew up in the sport of strongman. So like, I started training at 15. I competed at 16. So, I literally matured both from like a person perspective and a training perspective. So yeah, I came in with like, I'm still probably a little bit of a pessimist. There's still things that anger me, I'm bitter about, but those irrational thoughts of anger and stuff what I had as a teenager or kid or whatever you want to call it have changed a lot as I become an adult and obviously have, more life experience. I do think anger still motivates me a lot. I mean, I think anger is a really strong emotion. I think they rate it like 5 times stronger than like happiness. So it takes 5 times more instances of like happiness to counter it. So that's why like in relationships, somebody can say something negative to you 1 time and they can do 5 good things to you. And you're going to be like, yeah, but he or she was, mean or whatever. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's helped a lot. Just kind of having, being more grateful. I try not to post as much negative stuff. My life is honestly really good. I mean, I can't imagine, or I couldn't necessarily imagine where my life would be. Like, sure, I missed World's Strongest Man, my first opportunity, some things, injuries, stuff like that. But I mean, I'm like you, man. I'm doing the thing that I was blessed to be either good at or I've made myself good at. I get paid to do it. As far as I'm concerned, all my clients are friends, to me. I mean, they're all people I enjoy working with. I get to be at my house and wear whatever I want. I do have pants on right now. Don't worry. Life is pretty awesome. So I think a lot of that anger of being mad, like at the world or like wanting to, prove people wrong is slowly going away as my life has kind of gotten more in order.
That's good, man. And it's something that comes with growing up and getting older, right? We find that balance. We find the things that mean most, and we appreciate life. But let's talk about life as a heavyweight versus life as a 105, as a middleweight. I want to get down to the real truth as to the pros and cons to each, because you have been each. And it sounds like there's an eventuality where you will jump back to heavyweight. At least that's what I'm gathering from what you're saying so far. But I want to hear like the no bullshit, like give me the straight up differences from what you've experienced in terms of your life as a heavyweight versus now your life as a middleweight.
Is it called a pungent square? I think it's like the genetic thing where they cross and they have, yeah. So I'm pretty sure it's a pungent square. Mm-hmm. So like you can have positive 105 experience, negative, and then you have a positive open experience and negative open experience. So if you're a positive 105, that means that you're naturally at that body weight. You're not using a lot of like supplements to maintain that body weight. You're not doing any harsh, weight cuts, or you're not cutting too often. I mean, you probably have to do weight cuts, but like you're not doing like 6 of them a year. So you're at a weight that you're comfortable walking around. You don't have sleep apnea. You're able to do all the life things with your family. That's positive. A negative 105 experience would be like really harsh weight cuts, using more drugs, things like that. Same thing on open. In open, if you're able to walk around, maintain that body weight naturally, good blood pressure, you're not on a lot of supplements, because the cool thing about open is you get to eat a lot more food, which is the best supplement. I don't know why people don't think that. Like carbohydrates are rocket fuel. Like, don't tell me if you don't eat carbohydrates, you don't perform better. You do. So, if you're able to do that with like minimum like extra effort, you're able to be 300 pounds minimum extra effort, then that's a positive experience. If you're someone that's like force feeding, constantly sweaty, just like out of breath, sleep apnea, you can have sleep apnea, but like not managed well, and your life is miserable for 22 hours a day except the 2 hours you train, that's negative. So I think you can have either or. So I've been a heavyweight and felt very normal. I mean, I've walked around 300 pounds numerous times, never got out of breath going upstairs, never had sleep apnea, didn't have this, didn't have that. And I've also been a 105 where I was really comfortable. But on that same token, I've been both of those in a negative way. I've been cutting too much as a 105 or holding back my recovery abilities. So that's part of the reason I hurt my tricep, is I think I was dieting just a little bit too hard. And by too hard, I'm talking like 500 calories less a day. Like, just I was not at maintenance. And then as a heavyweight, I gained weight too quick a couple times, and that caused me to have a little bit high blood pressure, feeling sick. Did everything wrong there. So I think as long as you have a balance of it, you're healthy. And health is obviously going to be relative, because we're in a sport where health is not the goal. The performance is the goal. But you have to find a good balance. So you can't be 100% performance. You'd be dead. So people can get away with like 1% health and 99% performance. And those are the people that like blow up the world's strongest man, and then they don't come back because obviously their health was not prioritized enough. And then you could be the person who's just like doing bodyweight movements, and they're 99% health and 1% performance. So you're finding something on that spectrum that's going to fit for you. So I know that's not the best answer, but I would say that kind of like is what I would tell people if they're on the cusp. If you're 5 foot tall, you're probably not going to be a heavyweight. If you're over 5'9", though, depending on your build, you have a chance. And I think there are some 105s that could be heavyweights, but because of the allure of the titles they have out now, they haven't done it. They haven't done it.
Well, it's a hard pill to swallow. It's a lot of food to swallow. And especially, well, we can get into that further. But instead of going down that road, what has exactly driven you in terms of your conquest in the 105s? Like, what initially drove you to make that switch? What drove you to compete as a 105 for OSG this year? And I mean, it takes a lot. I think of what it would take me to go down from a heavyweight down to a middleweight, and that's a big change. Paint that picture for me.
So I'll be honest, OSG this year is obviously was easier for me to win at 105 than would have been open. Open was stacked. I mean, really, there's some great competitors there. But going back, I was at the body weight I could cut to do middleweight, so I kind of wanted to get a pro card there. And I think everybody kind of agrees with, winning something one time can be an accident, but winning something twice, probably not an accident. I think it was Yoka Okla, or how do you say his last name? I'm pretty sure he said that when he won his 2 World's Strongest Mans. But yeah, so I kind of wanted to get 2 pro cards, so it wasn't an accident, So I did that. And then since I was a 105, I always wanted to win some title. So I thought maybe I would just, win America's Strongest Man at 105 and then go back to heavyweight. And thanks to Sean, that didn't happen. So then I kind of did that. And then I won Worlds. So that kind of like sort of checked the box, because I'd beaten pretty much every American like 105 by that point in some show. And then with the injury and everything, I obviously lost body weight because I'm not going to weigh 330 with only one leg. So I got down to like 265, did bodybuilding, got to 290. There was a lot of hype for the 2022 about returning champions. So I said, all right, bet. So I actually had to lose about 30 pounds to come down and compete in OSG. And unfortunately they were not there. So that's tough to swallow when you lose 30 pounds of tissue for for that. But yeah, I would not have done very well at open, so I kind of had to do 105. Um, but it's my body weight now is pretty much between 255 and 265, so it's pretty natural, uh, easiest to stay at that point. So it's not a big cut anymore. It's nothing crazy.
Gotcha. Now, outside of the scope of what drives you as a middleweight, what drives you? Period. What keeps you going? It's hard to walk this path. You and I both know it. Everyone who walks it for an extended amount of time knows it. What keeps you going?
I mean, I think we all love it. So I think like just it's something about man, it's just something about being in that flow state, like putting your hand on a barbell or like watching that stone just like float, or the yoke. Like I love how the yoke just crushes you, but like when you dominate a yoke, you feel like you just like took on like the world. It's literally the world on your back. So I mean, I really do love the sport as far as like how I trained for it. When it comes to competing, I think maybe it's just a human thing. I want to prove that like I'm in some ways worthy of being here. It's a gift to be alive, and it's a gift to have whatever genetic predisposition you have. So like I want to capitalize on what I have, and I've been given some gifts of maybe I'm more resilient, maybe maybe my body moves a little faster, I have more speed. I don't want to just sit at home and watch it go away. I've already proven I'm pretty good at it, so I want to like realize it and be able to like exhaust it in my lifetime. And it sets an example for a lot of people. Now I'm in an example. I have six brothers, five of them are younger, but I have to set an example there. For my family, and then also an example for all the people I work with. I mean, who would I be as a coach to be a quitter, or who would I be as a coach to try for a couple of years and then stop? So there's a lot of motivations tied up, and a lot of it's just like don't quit. Outlast people. Keep getting better. Those types of things.
Well, you definitely inspire me, brother, and I can only imagine the twinkling eyes that your younger brothers look up to you and the inspiration that you give them, and of course your athletes. It's very impressive, man, and it has been quite a powerful experience. I've told you before privately, but it's been a very powerful experience to watch you and all the miles you've traveled over the years that I've known you, and to really see you back in action. It's great, brother, and I know it's just the beginning. It's 2023 is going to look like quite a powerful year for you, but still, while we're on the scope of talking about heavyweight versus middleweight, what are your thoughts on Nick Canby going heavyweight? He's made it clear to everyone that that's his plan. How do you feel about that?
Well, I must not have been on the email list because he did not tell me before OSG that he was going to do that. So I do kind of think, to be completely honest,
I want complete honesty. Let's hear it.
I think he skirted away from competing against me one more time. I think he should have really arranged to compete against me one more time. Of course, he'll say, we'll come up to heavyweight, and I'll be like, well, I already did. So it's just kind of like whatever. But I think he'll do well. I mean, the people that I'm going to disagree with, so I'm not saying I'm not his friend or whatever, but like people you butt heads with in strongman are usually people you respect. So, I mean, in 105, there's some competitors I really would not really like to be around, but they are the best at their job. They're the best 105s, and I fully respect them and what they do, and they made me who I am. So Canby is one of those people. I mean, he's been pro since 2015. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe 2014. So he's been around a while. He's made consistent progress. He's smart. He definitely hit the 105 class at the right time, because the amount of prize money he won just a couple years after mine is 10 times. So he monetized himself. He's a better image. Just everything he's got going for him. So I think he's going to really ride that momentum into getting or doing well at heavyweight. I will say this about anyone. I hope no one gets free invites based on notoriety. So I don't think as a 105 you should necessarily get like freebie invites in heavyweight. I think his plan is to go to Arnold, which is an interesting loophole because I can't do that because I'm already a heavyweight. So I'd have to give up my pro card to do that. But smart move. I know it's not the first person to try it. I've been to the Arnold. It's tough. So hopefully he does well. And if he wants to come back to 105, he better hurry up because I'm about ready to eat up and be 300 pounds. So
I was about to ask, what comes next for you? Is Giants Live in the future again? Is World's Strongest Man in the future?
Like I mentioned earlier in the podcast, I did have a handshake agreement of being able to do one international show. I would love for them to do, if there's certain lifts I can kind of like do well, I'd love to just do one of those and then finish out the show. I think I bring good entertainment quality. I don't think anyone would, I'd hope no one would say like, oh, he doesn't deserve to be there. But I'm a very honest person. Like, I'm not going to show up to a show Like if somebody handed me an invite, I'm not going to show up and disrespect that invite. Um, so yeah, when I'm ready, I'd love to be able to do some big international show again. But I don't want to have to. How do I phrase it? I don't want to have to get like I don't want to have to push as hard as fast and get as sick and just feel like shit and like
Right.
all that. But, I want to be walking around at 300. Like, yeah, I'm feeling pretty strong. Maybe I'll start a contest prep, and then 12 weeks I do the contest instead of like, oh, we got to do it right now type
Yeah.
thing.
Are there any specific international shows that just like, wow, if that could be the one, that would be the one you want to do?
I mean, any of those arenas over in the UK look really cool.
Let's say one that's got an overhead lift. That's like a redemption of a lot of sorts. But man,
I would totally do the axle. I kind of tell myself I'll do in some ways, I want to do the exact axle just because I'm that kind of person that's kind of sick and I want to do like exactly the same bar.
I would love to see that, man. And I'm not the only one who would.
Yeah, that would be cool. But I don't know if I really have anything more to prove, like competing overseas or anything. So I wouldn't even mind doing it something like in America. I just think I want to get stronger, and for me to get stronger requires me to eat more. So even if I didn't compete, I just want to be a big, strong dude. You know, and 105 I could do for a while, but it means I have to be a little bit less than I want to be, and that's just kind of tough for me to accept. Not being a bigger guy when I can be.
So are we going to see Andrew Clayton in the heavyweights again in 2023?
I would like to say before I turn 31. So yeah, I turn 31 in November. So I'd like to say I'd be a heavyweight by end of next year, but maybe early 24. It depends on all those qualifier things, jumping through the hoops.
Oh yeah, man. I mean, that's the Andrew Clayton that I initially met, and it's crazy to see all the transformations. And I know you're a big, strong dude, and I can imagine. I was talking to Laz, and of course, Evan and Martins when we were all doing commentary there. And even watching you hit all of these weights, that were there for the 105s, like, dude, and myself, any of those guys who were in the opens, like, I know how you feel about having jumped into the opens this year, but you would have wrecked it. Like, you maybe not would have come out the winner, but you have all of the tools in your bag right now to where you could contest heavily at the heavyweight range. And I know you only want more. So the amount of training that you're going to do between now and the eventual time that you take stage next year as a heavyweight, I mean, I'm looking forward and biting at the chops to see that version of Andrew Clayton just hit the stage by storm. It's going to be impressive.
Well, thanks.
Yeah, brother, of course. This is the time of the show where I like to space out. I'm a big space nerd, and you happen to live in Florida next to one of the epic space centers of the country. So yeah, I've always wanted to use my voice and this microphone to kind of get people talking about space again. I feel like there was a lapse in time where people just kind of didn't, and they didn't really care about it too much. But let's kick this off by, what's your favorite space movie of all time?
Does Space Jam count?
Space Jam does count, but you have to give me why. Like, what made it your favorite movie?
I mean, it's got Michael Jordan in it. It's just like all the cartoons, and then that magic water. I mean, Bugs Bunny gives them the water, and all of a sudden, there's
What do you think that was? What was that magic water? If we had, what was it?
It was mindset / placebo.
There we go. That was definitely it.
Mindset / placebo.
Have you rewatched it since it initially came out?
Man, probably 10 years. I don't know what year it came out.
It came out when we were really young, that's for sure. But I'm wondering, what's the rewatch value of it? Like, is it going to have the same allure if you watch it again?
I think it just gets pumped so much in all the branding because people will use that logo for like their, that the Space Jam logo, but put their words in it. So I think it's kind of just iconic, some of the branding of it. Maybe the movie isn't as good as I remember, but I still feel like it's funny. It's cartoons, man. It's got to be halfway deep. It probably looks terrible now that we have like 4K TVs and stuff, but
I don't know if it was a rumor that they were going to be doing either a remake or a sequel, or I don't know. Maybe they did, but would you watch it if they came out with one?
I'm not a fan of remake. Don't like the Mulan remake or the real life. I feel like they ruined something because that's my I grew up with that. So like as a kid, you're ruining it. Like the Toy Story movies are okay because they build upon it. But if somebody redid the original Toy Story, I would not like it. Yeah. So
I will say though, I did watch the live action Lion King, and I actually enjoyed it. It was very different than, of course, the cartoon that we all grew up on loving, but that was one where I was like, okay, they did this pretty all right. But if they did a live action Space Jam and they tried to make the cartoon versions of the characters look more real life, I would not be about that. It would have some cringe appeal to it to see like a hairy Bugs Bunny versus just the painted color. But in your opinion, what's the single coolest about space and the cosmos? Like just the first thing that comes to mind when I say, Andrew, tell me something cool about space, or what means the most to you about it.
Well, I think those iconic pictures of them, like Earth, and how small we are. Like, even when I get in a plane flying contest to contest, like, we are literally insignificant in a way, but then we can all have such a tremendous impact. So I think, like, when you zoom out, it's like, dude, we're like one little tiny little speck in this universe. So that's like the first thing that comes to mind is just like how grand this whole, whatever you believe, Big Bang Theory, there's a God, whatever. It's just, I don't know, just amazing.
When you tell me that, I recall this famous quote from Carl Sagan where he's looking at this picture that the Voyager craft took back, looking at Earth through, I think, at the edge of one of Saturn's rings or something. And it's called the pale blue dot. He says something like, everyone who has ever been, everyone who's ever lived, who has ever existed, lives there on this very pale blue dot. And it's this tiny little, almost 1 pixel of the image that you see. And that's taken just from the middle of our solar system, Saturn or Jupiter, and that's just our solar system. There's so much more out there. And it's this very existential feeling of insignificance, but also significant in a way that we can make sense and comprehend our place in this massive, massive expanse. And it's a very weird feeling in a way, to feel so small, but also so capable. I've felt that when I've stood on top of mountains before too. And of course, when I've traveled to contests looking down at clouds from above, like it's for people who go about their lives trying to become as powerful as possible, it's a very surreal sort of awakening when you feel how small you are.
And it humbles, because even though we're people who are succeeding in this sport, like when we were on an airplane, there's someone on that plane that doesn't care. They don't know about us, for one. And then two, they're out on their plane to see someone else significant that we don't know anything about. So we all have these significant, like little connections to one another, but they're all kind of like, somehow they're all connected, but we're all not connected. It's just a really humbling experience to know that no matter how big you get, we're all really the same size, so to speak.
I love it, and it keeps us real with the reality of how this life is. But let's talk about Artemis 1 and the recent NASA mission back to the moon, finally, in 50 years. That launched just outside of Orlando, and you're in Jacksonville. Did you get to see it?
I honestly did not know about that. I didn't watch it. But I have been to the Kennedy Space Center, and I did get to see where they used to launch from there, and whatever that rover thing is that goes out. When it has the shuttle on it, it's only 1 mile an hour out to the thing, and then when it has a shuttle off it, because it has less weight, it goes a whopping 2 miles an hour.
Oh, well, that's 100% increase, But
it's, the logistics of what goes into space was real. I think I went in high school. It was really fascinating. I mean, even like the size of the hangars they build them in, like you think, because there's nothing else in that area, you think, oh, it's just a decent sized building. And then they tell you like, oh, that building is as wide as like 15 buses or whatever weird metric they use. Cause we're in America. We never use feet. But yeah, it's pretty neat, but it was weird because I don't think they had because you said it's the first one they launched in 50 years, right?
We haven't been back to the moon in 50 years, since 1972. And it's crazy to know. I mean, this mission that launched doesn't have humans on board. It's kind of like the precursor mission to get ready for when we put humans on that rocket next year. But it was doing flybys around the moon, testing out all of its instruments and diagnostics. And you might have seen some pictures of the Orion spacecraft taking pictures or selfies of the Earth from far away. And it's pretty cool, man, to know that there's a track to get back there and establish a lunar presence. And it always seems weird. We're talking about going to Mars within this next decade, and yet there's no real presence established on our closest neighbor, which is the moon. So it's exciting to know that there's actually plans and money to put this thing back on track. But what do you think the moon will look like in 15 years? Do you think that there's going to be active colonies? Do you think that we as citizens of the Earth can go there freely? What do you think?
The strongman federation of the moon.
Hey man, less gravity, we could be snatching up way more than our max deadlifts. I mean, that's some pretty cool stuff to think about.
The logistics of that would be insane. Um, I honestly, it's cool. I saw these in here. It's cool that you have them in here because I just haven't thought about it. I think a lot of people, it's out of sight, out of mind, and maybe I don't see it as such a priority to go to space, but as you paint it, I mean, it's something like constantly expanding our knowledge of both Earth and the things around us is probably important for advancement of society. Do I think there'll be a colony there in 15 years? If there is, it's like super wealthy people that just have like money to burn like nobody's business. Because I just can't see it benefiting us logistically. I don't think we'd even fill up the planet by that time period. I think our birthing rates are actually down to where they're kind of like, I thought they were neutral. Maybe they're still a little bit in the gain, but I don't think it's going to be a necessity. It's going to be definitely a luxury to very wealthy individuals or whoever that has that incentive.
Now, you think it would be restricted to just wealthy individuals, or do you think that there would be a huge scientific community there too? Because what if, and I love to like fantasize about this, but what if someone came knocking on your door like, hey, we need you to lift on the moon in the name of science? Would you accept that invite?
I mean, for the right amount of money, probably. I mean, if you allowed me to be off for like, if it was enough money to be like off work for like 3 years, I'll do a year on the moon for a couple years off, like something like that.
What if there was no money involved? What if it was just a volunteer?
That's true, but I would have to know the risk. Like, I'd hate to like. I'm not indebted enough to like die going to the moon. Like, how some people like are willing to die to win World's Strongest Man. Like, It's not the same moon. Do I think? That's what I think about the science community there. I mean, if there's enough research to have there and the cost of transport is low enough, I mean, I don't see a reason why the people that would gain from learning about the moon wouldn't have a shop there, so to speak. I mean, seems to make sense. I guess it comes down to money and what they want to research and how high priority it is.
Well, the abundance of things that could be researched there is huge. I mean, it seems like, it's just the moon. It's this big gray rock out there, but it's a planetary body, or not a planetary, a satellite body that has a mini gravitational field, no atmosphere. It's easier to get things off of to go to other parts of the solar system. So there's a lot of things that can be gained from it too. But the thing is like, how do we see the benefit to it? And that's kind of the bridge that the scientific community or the space community in general kind of has to like bridge that gap in terms of making the public aware. Like, hey, this is the value of going here. It's hard to see because we got so many things that plague us here on Earth. Things that we're dealing with right now, whether it's economic recessions, the cost of eggs going up, whatever it be, man. It's hard to see like, well, why do we have to go through this extra effort to be out there when we got stuff to focus on right here? But especially on that topic, with the things that we're dealing with here on Earth, you live in Florida. In the scope of the past, let's talk about your adulthood life. We hear so much and we see so much coming from the science community in terms of how climate change is affecting our world in Florida. Florida is one of those areas where we're seeing a lot of potential change happening in the next decade or so. Sea levels rising, weather patterns becoming more extreme. We just had the first hurricane there making landfall in November in a very long time. And that's very uncharacteristic, and we can possibly attribute that to climate change. Have you experienced any signs of climate change there in Florida as a Floridian, whether it's very subtle, whether it's very obvious, anything you can think of?
So climate change is something that I think you can't really speak on because you'd have to have research, and so it'd be like objective.
All I'm asking is for objective.
Yeah. So it'd be so objective. So like, have I noticed that the temperature got hotter? I mean, I'm basing it off of what I think it's called like the rainy day phenomenon, where like you remember the rainy days, but you forget all the days it's sunny. So people usually report more rainy days when they look back in hindsight, because of course you're going to remember the days you got rained out. You don't remember that there's like 3 weeks of perfect weather. So I can't really say I've noticed anything about climate change. Florida is a state that's not really designed to be what it's supposed to be. So like the Everglades being drained and canaled and all that kind of stuff, like the state was supposed to be mostly underwater anyways. So like through all the developments to have people have boats and have more land, I was just watching on it. We've kind of messed up the natural course of things too with that. As far as the weather, tides, I mean, I'm just not informed enough to know. I just know enough that because of the value of Florida and the land, we've done things in Florida to make there be more land that doesn't necessarily allow the best way to live in. I live more north, so they haven't really done any like. There's no place where they just dropped a bunch of dirt to make more land to sell for thousands of dollars. People that retire, but down in the Everglades area, that's essentially what they did. They put dirt there, drained the water, and really it should have had water there the whole time. So we're not really surprised when a hurricane comes through and like dumps water there that it wants to stay there or wants to flood there or whatever.
Talking to a lot of the citizens, a lot of the hotel staff, just people there who lived in Florida while we were there for OSG, they weren't necessarily sweating so much the impact of that hurricane. What was the name of this one that just recently hit while we were there? Was it Ian?
No, it was Nicole, but
Ian was the previous one. And that was the thing, is that the citizens and the residents there were still dealing with the cleanup from Ian, that the Nicole was going to be a problem because they were still dealing with all that. At what point, and this is, again, just purely objective, with playing, let's say, quote unquote, playing God, with turning Florida into something that it shouldn't be, whereas most of it should be underwater. At what point does humanity let go of it? Let go of Florida and let it be claimed by the ocean,
Man, you're gonna diss Florida like that? I think
Florida. No.
Well,
I'm talking about, like, if we are playing God, and if there's a point in the future where the earth tries to reclaim and swallow it back down, when do we stop spending millions of dollars trying to pump out water and preserve infrastructure and just let it go? Is there a point?
Yeah. So I think it's because like most things, it's an extrinsic value. So like living by the ocean doesn't necessarily have intrinsic value. It's not like it's making it more readily available. Like, yes, you could go fish, but like it's not necessarily cheaper because you live by the ocean anymore, right? Because things get trucked into the state. Those extrinsic values, people that want a waterfront property or want to be on the river or want to have a boat. So it's when that extrinsic value goes down, I think, because you have all these retirees, and now you even have people with the recent political, whatever you want to call it. I mean, our state's very open, doesn't have income tax. So there's a lot of other benefits that get people to come here other than like the beach. So I think if you took away a lot of those incentives that originally were here because they wanted to populate Florida was not nearly as populated as New York back in like the 30s, and that's when they started pressing by not having income tax was one of the ways to pump people down here. But yeah, like once you get rid of some of those incentives where people that don't want to live by a beach are like, yeah, I don't know if I want to live here. I'll just move more north where it's not an issue. But as long as you have those things, you're going to have the athletes come here. You're going to have the retirees come here. You're going to have the people that want to, be on the water, have the boat come here. And for people like me, I like Florida because like my family's here and there are perks to education and income tax. And so I just did my due diligence in finding a home that's not an area that can be flooded, but is still only about a mile from a river. So I get to see the water, but the cost of there being damage is relatively slim as far as like hurricanes and floods and things like that.
That's awesome, brother. And last thing I want to ask you, because I can relate to the climate here in South Texas. I live on the Gulf Coast, here in the Gulf of Mexico. Still maybe about 50 minutes from the coast itself, but our climate is very similar to in Florida. Every time we go to Florida, it's very different compared to going elsewhere because it's the exact same feel as it is home. The humidity, the ever stable temperature, it's never really getting too cold. Do you find yourself at this time of the year craving more cold, or are you just perfectly content with it staying in the mid 70s?
No, this is so it's actually a little warmer today. I don't know what it was. I almost took my shirt off on my walk today. I like this weather a lot, and I actually have to rotate my training events or how I train events for it because I can't hit a grip PR in the summer. It's just too sweaty. It's just like too much humidity. So that's like the maintain period. And over the winter, my hands are locked in on the farmer. So that's the build period, same with Atlas Stone. So I'm really enjoying this. And right now my garage isn't done, so I don't have AC yet. So moving the equipment and setting up and handling all those logistics will be a lot easier right now. For sure.
Absolutely. When are you all set up in your new home and training environment?
Man, I was hoping it was going to be this week. All the contract. I'm sure trying to have a gym and getting things done. It's just it's difficult. I'm trying not to complain because it's a blessing I'm able to afford to do it, and in some ways I can justify doing it, right? Because much like you, I can justify things because I have an end goal in mind, and I'm able to able to profit a little bit off of it in the process. So, but hopefully, for sure, by the first of the year, I want to get back to hard training by the first of the year. So if that's not the case, if you hear about any accidents happening, it's because I tried to hang the drywall, do the electrical, do the plumbing.
Well, hey man, I'm so happy for you. I love to know that you're getting set up in a new home, that you've hand selected, you got your garage being built and ready to start some hammered down training in 2023. But brother, congratulations once more on this.
Feel free to come visit. I have a guest room, and I'm gonna try to bribe everyone to come out, and I think it'll be really cool to train with a bunch of people.
I would love to come out someday. It's I don't have many good excuses to go to Florida, but you are one of them, my friend. So wear that title proudly. But congratulations on your victory at OSG. Thanks for coming on the podcast, brother. Where can people connect with you out on social media?
So I mainly operate on running Strongman as my handle on Instagram. I also have my business page, First Called Strength, on Instagram. So yeah, feel free to shoot me a DM if you're interested. I try to help out, both with online coaching and even just if you need to consult about something. I love talking shop. So
you heard it here, everybody. Andrew Clayton has been our special guest on Titan Talk today. To you, my friends out there in the universe of power, keep wayfaring with curiosity, chase that strength, and above all else, stay hungry. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been Titan Talk. Andrew, thanks for joining me. We'll see you next time.